No matter how bad things are, if you just make one small decision each day, it'll be a massive improvement. And you just got to kind of take micro steps forward.
People say, they're afraid of being the smartest person in the room. And you have a PhD and you're a computer scientist. You carry that intelligence very quietly.
As a leader, you don't know everything and you're not expected to know everything. And one of the important things to do is to always be receptive to ideas.
Welcome back to the CEO Advantage podcast. I'm really pleased to have with me a good friend of mine, a long-term friend of mine, Steve Mabbs, who is the founder and CEO of Escient, which is a business and technology advisory firm, and they're fantastic. We've used them ourselves. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks, Paul.
Glad to have you. Every guest that we have on the CEO Advantage podcast, I ask the same opening question, and I'm really fascinated to hear yours. What was the first job that you got paid for?
First job I got paid for was when I was a kid. I actually had quite a few jobs when I was a kid. And the very first one was I was working in a concrete factory, making well liners. Actually, I probably was about, 13 or 14 at the time. And one of my mates was working there and he said, "Oh, you got to come down here. This is great." So anyway, I went down there in my summer holidays in Perth and met the boss, and he said, yeah, you can start. When can you start? Start now. And it was $50 a week. It was working in the hot 40-degree heat in Perth in summer, making well liners. And
what's a well liner?
It's like the thing that you sink into the ground. It's a big cylindrical piece of concrete, basically, that goes in the ground, and you stack them up, and that's how you make a well.
Right.
So if you know what I mean, like a big hole in the ground, it just stops the dirt from coming in, so you can get to the water or whatever it is at the bottom. Yeah, so I was Perth's best creator of well liners for a period of time there.
Fantastic. And so you grew up in Perth?
I did, yeah. Born and bred, yeah.
Yep. And finished school in Perth. What did you do when you finished school?
So I did engineering at Uni of WA, so electronics engineering. So that was a 4-year course. And then partway through that course, I applied. I was in the Army Reserve while I was studying. Really loved that, actually. My dad was in the Army and his dad and so on. That's not why I joined. I actually just decided it would be a great thing to do. And me and a few mates, we all signed up on the same night, the university regiment. So joined the Army Reserve. And then partway through my studies, I think it was about halfway through third year, I applied for an Army scholarship to finish the degree, and they paid me for my last year and a half, and then I joined the regular Army when I graduated, and that was when I left Perth and got posted over to Melbourne.
Very smart. No HECS debt for you.
No, there was no HECS debt back then anyway.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so I actually just managed to scrape through, and then later on when I did some higher education studies, HECS had come in, but because I was doing a higher degree, I got exemption, so managed to dodge all of that.
Nice. So you've moved to Melbourne. You're with the Army. What's your qualification?
So I was in the Army, had my Bachelor of Engineering degree, and I joined the corps called RAME, which is the Royal Australian Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, as what the Army called a direct entry officer. Mm-hmm. So direct entry meant that you didn't do a sort of a full year or 4 years of military training. You did a 6-week, they call it the knife and fork course up at Canungra, teach you how to look and dress and speak and eat like an officer. Mm-hmm. So I did the direct entry course along with a lot of other professions that the Army was recruiting. So doctors, nurses, dentists, teachers, lawyers, etc. We all sort of came in through that channel into the Army. And then I did 2 postings in the Army. I met my wife actually in the Army, Martha. She was in fact the first person I met in Melbourne and the only person therefore I knew in Melbourne when I got posted over there. So she was posted to the same military base, which was Broadmeadows Army base, and she just finished her Portsea training year. And I did 2 postings in the Army and then decided actually that a long-term Army career probably wasn't for me. So I decided to go back to uni and went back to Melbourne Uni and did a PhD.
A PhD, what was your thesis?
In computer performance modelling. So multi-processor scalable computer architectures were a big thing at the time, and I decided that was what I wanted to do. So computer engineering, effectively, with a lot of maths. So I did that PhD, and that was 3 years at Melbourne Uni. During that time, actually, I had the opportunity to go over to Argonne National Labs in the US, and they had a high-performance computing facility there. And my wife still jokes about it, how when they took us into the computer room, they had one of everything. They had an Intel Hypercube, a connection machine, a sequence symmetry, all of these high-performance computers, a Cray XMP that, we only ever read about in Australia. And I went into this computer room and they had one of all of them there. And so I was, getting selfies taken next to all of these computers, sending them back to my wife, who was just shaking her head, thought she was married to the ultimate nerd, which she probably was.
Well, I think she'd be in a battle if she was talking with Kirsten, who would say the same thing. What did she stay in the army, or did she leave?
She stayed in the army. Yeah, no, she had a career in the army. Actually, she retired as a lieutenant colonel. Probably about she retired once, and then they actually asked her to come back for a project. So she probably retired for good about 5 years ago.
Wow! So she spent her entire career in the army.
Yeah, Army and then Army Reserve. But it was a pretty impressive career, and she's amazingly accomplished and very capable.
Yeah.
So
you finish your PhD, your nerd of the century, according to Martha.
Got the photos to prove it.
Got the photos to prove it. What did you do after that?
Well, the reason, I guess, I was interested in research and in an academic sort of career at that stage. Really enjoyed my time at uni, and so I got a job at the Defence Science and Technology Organisation here in Adelaide. And they were doing the rounds, recruiting around Australia and looking for PhD graduates in areas that were of relevance to different divisions and different work that they were doing. And I was recruited into high-frequency radar division to work on the Jindalee operational radar, over-the-horizon radar. And that was, so when I graduated, I came across to Adelaide, and that was when I came to Adelaide for the first time. And that was back in 91. Really, it was quite a surprise. I'd been to Adelaide as a kid, but didn't really know Adelaide. But
and the DSTO wasn't really in Adelaide.
No, deep north, you might call it. As it was back then, yeah. So we were living in an army married quarter in Plimpton, and I was doing the trek out there every day, which was interesting when Martha got pregnant, and you sort of on edge, always sitting next to a phone, waiting for the phone call, and it was about a 45-minute commute. I remember up there, and there were no mobile phones back then. And I remember thinking, gee, what happens if she goes into labour, 10 minutes after I leave home, and then I get up there and then I come back, it could all be over. So, but luckily she timed it very conveniently on the weekend, so it all worked out.
But that's military precision.
She's always been a planner.
Yeah. So tell us about the DSTO. What was your role there, and how long did you do it for?
Yeah, so I was a research scientist, and I was looking at radar performance assessment, and I really enjoyed that job, actually. I was working with a great bunch of people, and I was given a great deal of autonomy to really kind of take my work in the direction that I felt, with guidance, within guide rails, of course. But really enjoyed that work and spent a lot of time analysing the performance of a trial that was done in 92, and was one of a team of people analysing the performance of this large radar system, and I was looking at all of the detection and tracking performance. It was a really worthwhile activity, and one that I got a lot out of, and truly trying to tune the performance of this radar to get the best improvement out of it possible.
And you talk about a team. Was that the first time you were in charge of a group of people and not sort of?
No, I wasn't in charge of the team. I was part of the team. No, the first time I really was in charge of people was actually back in the Army,
Yep.
where as a junior officer you tend to get thrown in the deep end. And I had 83 people reporting to me in my first year after graduating from uni, which sounds ridiculous, and it is ridiculous because I had no idea what I was doing. But it did teach me that there are probably different styles of leadership, and I was lucky that I had a warrant officer, Dick Turner, his name was. He was a warrant officer class 1, and he was kind of my 2IC in the area that I was looking after. And he was very experienced and a very good teacher, and I learned a lot from him actually about staying calm under pressure, and also trusting the advice of others. He was a valuable source of guidance and input for me. Yeah.
So you learned that pretty quickly and pretty early in your career about listening to people and valuing their input.
I did, yeah, and that's probably been a bit of a theme. I guess I've kind of come to strengthen that appreciation that as a leader you don't know everything, and you're not expected to know everything. And one of the important things to do is to stay connected to people whose advice you value, and always be receptive to ideas. And even now in Escient, when we welcome the new starters, one of the key messages I always like to give them is that we have a very kind of flat structure here, and everyone's approachable. Part of our culture is about being connected and collaborative, and that means anyone can talk to anyone about anything. And so people have got ideas they'd like to talk about or share or whatever, then I'm always receptive to that, because all the best ideas, honestly, to do with this company have come from other people. So as a leader, part of your role, I think, is just to kind of harness that and make a decision, but listen to the ideas that everyone has. Yeah.
What are some of the ways and techniques you've evolved over time to encourage people to share their ideas and be part of conversations? Often you can get particularly really clever people who'll be sitting in a meeting. They're doing all the listening and gathering and not a lot of the contributing. What are some of the techniques and ways that you've been able to draw out some really clever people into making a contribution?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess one of the skills that I think everyone really should strive to have is active listening, and trying to read the room and stay connected to people and how they might be feeling. You can read a lot into people through the expression on their face and their body language and that sort of thing. I think it's important to try and make sure everyone's encouraged to share what they feel, and make sure everyone gets an equal opportunity to do that, because different personality types, you and I have come across different people in our careers, and some people are more outspoken than others. Some people are stuck on transmit, and it's hard to hit the pause. But other people who have got great ideas don't always put them forward. And I remember when I did a course at Harvard, we were put into a living group, and there were 8 of us in this living group. It's like a study group. And there was one guy from the Philippines, Aristeo, who was the quietest guy in the group. But whenever you asked him something, he always had something really interesting to say. And I think, it sort of behoves all of us really to kind of to really draw that out from people and just pause and ask him, what do you think, Aristeo? What's your view on this? And then listen carefully to the answer, because it's quite often there's nuggets in everything like that.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? One of the things that I took away from Harvard was the use of a pair of photos for meetings, and the 2 photos that they had was one of a hippo and one of an elephant.
Yeah.
And to notice that the hippo has a really big mouth and small ears and is a bit obnoxious, and an elephant has got large ears, a small mouth, and a great memory.
Yeah.
And it was just such a great visual of meeting dynamic, and from a and it stuck with me the whole time. You would have thought I'd come back from Harvard with something really fabulous, but it's this.
Besides the elephant there.
Besides the elephant and the hippo. But it was such a fabulous technique for having in your mind in a meeting where you have really clever people who often don't speak in the meeting, and some people who do a lot of the speaking, to master the art of letting the speakers speak enough, but also asking them and drawing out the elephants to say, come on, I need you to speak. And often the elephants are like, well, I'm quite happy to not. And part of the challenge of, well, it's not really useful to have you in this meeting then if you're not going to contribute. It's like, well, hang on a minute, I've got some. And off they go. But it was such a great visualization of the people within meetings.
Yeah, there is a third type I've heard some people described as in senior leadership, and that's crocodiles when they're sort of all teeth and no ears.
Yeah, that isn't it interesting? We were talking about that before we started the show. The kind of CEs that haven't seen to make it onto this show, I would say, are the crocodiles, where they're those tough guys that and women who do lots of barking and of course perpetuate this entrepreneur's myth that it was all them. And it was their guile and hard work that got everything done. And you and I both know, like, probably wasn't though.
No.
You're clever and driven or whatever you're using, but it wasn't just you.
No, that's right. I think, humility and authenticity are important attributes, I think, for any leader because, people want to trust you, and your clients want to trust you, and society wants to trust you. And I think, you signal your underlying values in everything you say and everything you do, and people get a read on that pretty well. And if you don't behave consistently, or you try to, reinvent the past or history, or, try to sugarcoat something or reframe it, then, people, trust gets eroded. People like it when you're authentic and consistent, and that's the basis for trust, I think.
Yeah. I want to come back to pick up at the DSTO in a moment. But before that, as we're talking about meetings, and often on the CEO Advantage podcast, we've had people say, they're afraid of being the smartest person in the room because they're not going to learn anything much today if they're the smartest person in the room. But when you're coming into the room and you have a PhD and you're a computer scientist and not that sort of level of intellect coming into a room, you carry that expertise and you carry that intelligence very quietly and gently. You don't swing that around in a
I know. I never
room.
mentioned it actually. No,
I
don't. I think you got to be. I feel that if I said to people, I'm Dr. Stephen Mabbs, and I always called myself that, when I've got a PhD and whatever, I think it would actually undermine who I'm trying to be. To be honest, I think a lot of people, some people may feel that, with a PhD, I'm kind of more academic, theoretical. Whereas actually, what I'm trying to be is pragmatic and approachable and humble and all those sorts of things. So I don't use that title. I found it was helpful once when I was talking to a bank and I need to extend a line of credit. They seem to appreciate it. So, but otherwise, no, I don't bother, and I just don't think it's helpful really anymore. I think I've kind of outlived the usefulness of my PhD and what I'm doing at the moment, to be honest.
Yeah, it's not a common trait amongst people perhaps with a doctorate on the, and they should be rightly proud of it. It's you've had to work very hard for it. But there are quite a number of people I've met throughout my career with PhD or doctor on the front, where they throw that whatness at you early in a meeting just to let you know who you're in a meeting with. And I think, gosh, that's for a smart person, that's a pretty dumb way to start a meeting because you're already at the top of the tree.
Yeah, it probably depends on the audience. I mean, if you're in an academic environment or a research environment, and you want to
the appropriate place for it,
credibility, then I think it's important and appropriate. But I'm mainly working in a business environment now, and I think people I'm talking to might say, why did he say that? What's the message he's trying to put across? And I don't think it's anything that I would really want to put across. So I don't use it.
So you're a fresh PhD. You're at DSTO. What comes after DSTO?
After DSTO, yeah. So it was interesting. I had a number of opportunities that I could have kind of gone forward with then, and I think it was 3 or 4. In fact, I was offered a postdoc at the University of Illinois. So when I'd gone overseas, I'd spent a bit of time there and got to know one of the professors over there, and that offer was on the table.
So how does an offer like that appear?
Word of mouth, really.
Yeah.
That they liked your work and they felt, that you would fit in here and continue your research, and it could be a couple of years or something like that. My supervisor actually knew that was the reason I went over there to begin with, was my PhD supervisor, Kevin Ford, his name was. He knew this guy, Ravi Iyer, who was one of the professors of computing and electronics engineering over there, and that opportunity came through that way. Another one was I was offered a software engineering lead role with a small startup company in Melbourne that were doing some pretty interesting things in terms of environmental noise monitoring. I was actually offered a promotion where I was at DSTO, and I was also offered an industry consulting position on the project that I was working on, the Jindalee project, because Telstra at the time had just been given the prime contract to build 2 more of these radars. It was a massive project, $1 billion project, and their team was looking for people who had some experience. And so I initially worked through another company called Integra that's no longer around, but then eventually left there and went direct and set up my own company called Permian.
So before we dive into Permian, can we just contextualize that time? Because the time that you're talking about, there's these pathways being offered to you and brought to you, was a time that that I lived through, and a number of the CEs that we've talked to, was a tough time. It was the sort of early 90s recession. We had to have sort of period. Lots of middle managers were being let go during that time. And there's Steve Mabbs swimming against the tide of people finding it hard to get work. You're finding it hard to choose from all of the opportunities coming your way. Did it feel like that at the time, or did that dawn on you a bit later, or is that the first time?
Probably dawned to me later. I mean, to be honest, I was oblivious to what was happening in the economy at the time. I was probably like a lot of people at, an early opportunistic stage of their career, really just thinking about the options that I had. And I guess the challenge for me really was they were all in quite different directions. And, you don't know it at the time, but the decisions you make early in your career, will have a massive impact on where you end up later on in terms of what you do and where you live and all this sorts of stuff.
Yeah. Can you give an example of one of those decisions you made early in your career that's...
Yeah, I think, joining the Army and getting posted to Melbourne we ended up living in Melbourne for 15 years, and that was the Army's choice that I ended up in Melbourne, and why I went to Melbourne Uni as well. And, could have been Sydney, or could have been Brisbane, or... and I met my wife in Melbourne, and we raised our kids there before we moved back to Adelaide, and that was just because the Army decided Melbourne was where I needed to be, and similarly with those 4 options that I had as well. It was stressful, and I know, I mean, it sounds kind of self-serving in a way to say this, but sometimes when you have, really good options, it actually can be quite stressful to work out, what you want to do. I honestly didn't know. I didn't have even a framework for thinking about, which way I should go. And wished I almost really just had like 2 choices or something like that. But they're all very different. And
because the opportunities for regret is really high. There's 4 things you could do, and potentially 3 things you could regret if you chose the wrong one.
That's it.
High stakes.
High stakes, yeah. So but I ended up choosing the Melbourne consulting, working on the defence project path, and that was a great path. I really enjoyed working on that project in defence industry as opposed to previously in a defence research environment, and got to work with a great team and a great boss, and felt quite valued in terms of the contribution I was making, and allowed me to set up my first company, which I did when I was 30, working on that project. So started out with just me, and then I hired some other people that I knew, and
Hmm.
and one thing I kind of appreciated that is another skill that's important for a leader to have is a good eye for talent. I think if you've got a good eye for talent and you can, hire people who are effective at what they do and have the right cultural fit and all that sort of thing, makes a massive difference. And one of the reasons why I set that company up actually was because I had looked around. That was a contractor rich environment. There were a lot of companies, small companies, helping out on the project. There probably would have been 300 people working on the project, including a lot of SME representatives and so on. And I got to interact with a lot of them and talk to them about the companies they work for and all this sort of thing. And I was building up a picture actually that there's always room for improvement in terms of how companies operate. And I felt that I had some good ideas that I could bring to bear if I set up my own company. So I did that. And like I say, initially it was just me. And then later on started hiring people and had that company. In the end, we set up an Adelaide office in 2001 because the project was coming to an end and there was more work happening in Adelaide.
And what did that company do? What were you doing?
Defence engineering consulting. Yeah.
So
So initially on the Jindalee project, but then with a number of other projects as well. So I worked on 4 big defence projects myself, and the Jindalee project was the first of those. And then there was a few other big ones like Vigil Air, which you wouldn't have heard of. It's a air defence command and control project. Air Warfare Destroyer was another project that I worked on as well. So, worked on some really, and Wedgetail was the other one, the Airborne Early Warning and Control.
And how long did you how long did you have that company, and how big did it get to?
Yeah, so I had the company for 12 years, and then we were about probably 30 people, I think. And then I actually got approached by an independent industry analyst. And honestly, I didn't even know that these people were out there. These guys existed that did this thing. But, there are matchmakers that are always analysing the industry and saying, oh, this company should merge with that company because of these synergies. And then they get a commission or whatever out of the deal structure. Anyway, this guy, Keith Reed-Seamer, his name was, called me up and said, I've had my eye on your company and I'd like to talk to you about an opportunity to actually get together with another company, merger or acquisition. And I thought, I've had tire kickers over the years, and to be honest, I didn't return his call, or I said I was going to catch up with him in Melbourne, and I just never got around to it. And anyway, he called me back and he said, oh, I'm keen. Anyway, so we set up a meeting, and he talked to me about this opportunity, and I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. And it was with SMS, Management and Technology. So he set up a meeting with SMS, and that was when I first met at that first meeting Tom Stianos, who was the CEO at the time, and a few other key people in the organisation. And I remember thinking, things like this don't happen to guys like me. This is like almost too good to be true, and it's not going to happen. And really, the sooner we all come to that realization, the better, and then we can get back to what we're doing. And so I thought, let's just all be completely honest. And so I just talked about our journey and some of the challenges I had and how I was planning to address them and where I saw my company going. And actually, I think one of the reasons the meeting was so successful was because Tom did exactly the same thing. He said, look, we've had a rocky road as well. And, we had these challenges with Sausage Software and the way we were initially acquired, and then the .com crash and had to kind of rebuild the company and so on. And it was actually quite refreshing. And I remember we talked about, why it made sense to do this. We had an Adelaide presence and SMS didn't, and we were largely in defence and SMS. That was a sector that SMS was keen to get more into and so on. And I remember leaving the meeting thinking, wow, this actually sounds like it might happen. Sounds like a really good idea. So anyway, we did the mating dance for about 9 months, including due diligence and all the rest. And then in January 2007, we became part of SMS, which, was a great company, and I was really, really pleased. So my role, my Melbourne team, I handed over to be part of SMS in Melbourne. And then I led the Adelaide team. So I was regional director in South Australia, which is
how we met.
When I met you. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. In my 25 years as a CEO, one of the hardest things to find was a consulting and advisory firm where they'd actually been CEOs. I created CEO Advantage to be the advisory firm I was looking for. Go to ceoadvantage.com.au and find out how we can help you and your team be the best in the business. And so what did that mean for, not for your business and not for SMS? We'll come to that. But what did that mean for you and Martha? Because that's an academic and an army officer, building a company from scratch that's now become so valuable that somebody wants to come along and make it part of theirs and make it something bigger. What happened for you and Martha when that happened?
Yeah, well, for the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't struggling financially, to be honest. Like most small business owners, we'd put everything into business, and the banks will only lend you money unless it's if it's secured by your mortgage and so on. So we had a large mortgage, and sometimes felt like we're living close to the edge, even though we were both working.
Yeah,
just putting everything back into the company, and Permian, the company, like most, was capitalized using retained earnings. I didn't have a lot of money to put in to start it, so. Every time we had a bit of money saved up, we'd say, okay, what can we do with it? We get an office, we hire an admin person, and, what do we do? And it's sort of very incremental growth. But also the other thing, I guess, was, and this kind of goes to the mindset of a lot of people and the importance, I guess, of ongoing education. And I know we'll circle back on that probably. But we had some bad years, some good years and some bad years. And I remember March 2003 was the worst month of my life because, we had a big project, the Jawn project, that was finishing up, except I was probably, pulling 100-hour weeks trying to finish it. I was in a key role in terms of the detection and tracking performance assessment. And we had planes flying around. It was a very expensive trial to conduct and a lot of heavy-duty analysis that needed to be done to kind of reduce all the, these gigabytes of data into something that was a statement of radar performance, which was quite complicated. And so I was kind of immersed in that heavily. And meantime, a lot of my guys on the project were finishing up, and we just weren't generating the sales that we needed to. And as a result, we were losing money month after month, even though I was kind of fully tied up. And it was just awful, Paul. So it's one of the reasons why I'm a big supporter of mental health now, is because, it was a very challenging time for me personally and for the family. And I've got to, say thank you, and I do, to my beautiful wife, Martha, for all the support she gave me during that time. But I learned a couple of things, actually, and these are kind of important lessons I've carried with me, and I give this advice to other people as well, is that, no matter how bad things are, if you just make one small decision each day that makes your life better, you'll look back in a couple of months' time and you'll be a long way from where you are now, and it'll be a massive improvement. And you just got to kind of take micro steps forward. Micro steps is all that's required. You'll get there. The other one is I realised that actually a lot of the source of my stress was because I didn't know what to do. And I found that by actually flowcharting it all out and saying, well, I'm in the shit. What am I going to do? Well, I could do this or I could do that. Well, if I'll do this, and if that doesn't work, I'll do that. If that works, I'll do this. And then you kind of map it out and you sort of have a rough roadmap of how you might get out of the situation. And once you've done that thinking, it's amazing how much the stress melts away.
Yeah.
Nothing's practically changed since, yesterday when you started thinking about that. But actually having a bit of guidance now in terms of what you're going to do to get out of the situation you're in makes a massive difference. And I didn't appreciate how much it changed my mindset from one of, I don't know what to do, to actually all I need to do is execute this plan, and then that things will be a lot better. So those are kind of two key things that I learned personally that made a huge difference to me going forward.
I think what you're talking about too is there's a phrase that I learned from business school as well, about this phrase of your hair catching on fire, the idea that cognitive load gets to a point where your head just feels like it's on fire. And your response to the world is that of your hair being on fire. So people will say, oh, what do you think of the weather today? And you're like, are you serious?
Yeah.
My hair's like even somebody saying something nice to you doesn't sound, and you don't respond pleasantly to it.
Yeah.
And like you, I draw on a whiteboard, and sometimes I get really excited. I didn't realize I could do it until it happened, but I can draw two-handed on a whiteboard in two different colors if I get really excited.
You've always been a high performer though.
Oh, well, I don't know. But it was one of those things where there would be so much in my head that if I didn't write it down or I didn't draw it on a whiteboard, then it would go from being brilliant to toxic.
Yeah.
Because I would not sleep. And then if I wouldn't sleep, then I would get Gatorade, because what else do you do? But sugar makes it better. So you take sugar and Panadol and whatever. And it was 1997 when I can remember going to the doctor and saying, and my business was going gangbusters. My water filtration business at that stage was going gangbusters.
Yeah.
And I remember going to the GP and said, if you can't help me today, I'm going to the Iron Cove Bridge and jumping off. And he was like, are you serious? And I'm like, dude, today, you need to help me today.
Wow.
And it was one of those, that dark spot where it was like, I just could not figure out how to get away. And things were great. And that it was because things were great, it was making it worse, because I'd be really grumpy and miserable, and people would say, you should be. And I was like, so I'm not a stupid person. My brain was going, yes, I know, but I can't get there.
Yeah.
And
I think that's an important perspective actually, is that, mental health has got nothing to do with intelligence. It's about having the tools and having the support to dig yourself out of a hole. And I think that's an important part of it. And, no one should ever think that smart people can't get into trouble, because they're smart. It's just not true.
Or that it's necessarily helpful advice to tell them what they should.
Yeah.
You should snap out of it, or you should or you should, because I can remember acutely hearing people saying that and going, and the inner voice screaming, going, I know, but I can't make that happen.
Yeah.
And it's making it worse.
The thing about that time is the March 2003 period is that it changed me forever, actually. And so when you met me, so I should finish the story.
Yeah.
So March 2003, it was terrible, but then I knuckled down using my approach and managed to turn things around. And ended Permian on a high. So by the time SMS came along in 2007 or 2006, we just had the 3 best years that we'd ever had. And so, it was a great ending to that story. But I was scarred as a person because I had lost a lot of my risk taking. I became quite risk averse, actually, and so one of the things I appreciated about being in an organisation like SMS, it was a renaissance for me personally. All of a sudden, instead of being at the top of a small company, I was actually surrounded by captains of industry that I was learning a lot from, going to these executive leadership meetings and just listening and soaking it up and just watching these amazing titans in the way that they sort of conducted themselves. And it was a great thing to do. But the other thing that really probably made a difference, and this is why I'm an advocate of lifelong learning and why I encourage other people to do it as well, is I had the opportunity to do the Harvard course, same as you, and I did the advanced management program over there, which is a 2-month residential course. And honestly, it was life-changing. I went into that course because I wanted to do something to sort of catalyse the next step in whatever I was going to do with SMS. But the course kind of made me realise, you get immersed in with 170 of your peers from around the world and different industry sectors, different countries, different job roles. There were finance people and HR people and operations people. And so you really get all these different perspectives, and everything was done using the case method, which I appreciated. And the cases started out simply and then they got more and more complicated. And, where it involved negotiation and strategy and marketing and so forth, culture and all that. And but to actually kind of participate in these debates and discussions and listen to all these different perspectives. When you look at the case, you think, oh, this is what I'd do. And then you hear someone else giving their perspective, you go, actually, what they said. And then you hear someone else giving you say, actually, what they said. And you really kind of realise that actually it's a lot more perspectives that can get brought to bear. And anyway, I came out of that actually really confident, knowing that I could kind of hold my own too in that environment. I felt quite confident coming out of it. And then I kind of felt actually that I was back and that I could start taking risks again. And it really changed me. So I think having that perspective, and that's really what gave me the confidence to start Escient with a different approach.
Yeah.
So the first time with Permian, it was all funded out of retained earnings, and I just thought, there's no way in hell I'm going to do that again. This time we're going to double down and we're going to make it happen. So instead of doing the cash flow forecasting and budgeting based on, how much can we afford to grow by, I ignored that. And I said, how fast do I think the market could bear us growing? And I knew that we could hire probably, based on history, 2 to 3 consultants per month per region. And we were planning to set up in 3 regions. And so I modeled it all out. And I knew that we would probably need, roughly 500 to 600 grand per location in terms of seed capital to get us started. And we decided that we were going to fund the company ourselves to get it going. So I had a bit of the SMS money left over from Permian, and my wife and I invested to start up Escient. And Tom, my old boss from SMS, who had since retired, he was keen to be a part of it as well. And so he tipped in. Tin Tran, Rebecca Campbell-Burns and others, a lot of employees were keen to be a part of it, which is quite humbling for me because, it's one thing to kind of take risks with your own money, but, when we've got 20 employees who have, tipped in 20 grand or 50 grand or whatever to help set this company up, it's quite scary actually. You realize accountability is a big thing. When you're accountable to yourself and your family, that's one thing. But when you're accountable to 20 families, that's another thing, and something we took quite seriously. And but everything went well, and the rest is history, as they say.
So we'll track the path of and the growth and success of Escient. But let's go back to Harvard and the decision before you went to Harvard, the decision to go. Because that's something that you and I have compared notes on before. Because I know I came back from Harvard and I was so excited to tell Kirsten wasn't particularly interested in what I'd learned, as in the subject and all of those sort of things, because she would have found them very boring for her.
Did she notice that you'd changed though?
Yeah, I was completely different because I went there. I remember on the Monday, sitting there in that round that they have, that 3 or 4 layered round, going. And the first thing I was like, "You're using chalk?" That was the first thing I was surprised by. They're still writing on chalkboards.
Yeah, that's right.
But being there on the Monday morning, having read all of the cases and making sure I didn't want to be embarrassed that I was going to be the one that hadn't read them, so I'd read them twice and got there. But I was so intimidated, and I was like, "What am I doing here? Look at all these smart people from around the world." By the end of the day, Monday, I was still feeling like that, but thank goodness I wasn't like that guy and that guy who embarrassed themselves today because they got caught out having not read the notes enough, at least, to have a properly formed opinion.
Yeah.
By the Wednesday, though, and I think the lecturer, Dutch Leonard, his name was, asked me my second question, or, asked me a question the second time. And I held a view that was contrary to a view that had already been held. And he then said, yes, that's what I was looking for. By Wednesday, I was like, it's okay for me to be here.
It's quite confidence boosting, isn't it?
Yeah. It wasn't that I was better, but at least I felt worthy of being there. I'd earned my spot by answering a few. And then by the Friday, I was sitting at a lunch table, and a CEO from England came over and asked me what I would do in a certain situation. We had similar organisations. And in my mind, I was like, I'm in America with someone from England asking what I would do.
Yeah.
And I got home and I said to Kirsten, it's like Disneyland for smart people. It brought me joy. And it was the first experience of joy in leadership.
Yeah.
Because I'd felt leadership and the obligation of leadership, and I'd felt the weight of leadership and the responsibility and all of that. But I'd never really discovered joy in leadership until I went to Harvard, and it wasn't even the subjects. I use those subjects every single day, but it was that confidence. It was that validation of like, you can be here.
Yeah.
I felt for the first time like I was allowed to be in the club. And it wasn't about the Harvard Club or Ivy League or any of it. It was just that inner voice for me was like, oh, I'm not a B grader. Yeah. I can play.
Yeah, I had a similar takeaway, and but also just having the tools to, because obviously what they're teaching is pattern matching. You start out with simple cases that might be just about, a decision in relation to marketing or strategy or something like that. And then you build up into more and more complex cases. And really what they're trying to get you to do is pattern match and unpack them and look at what you see and kind of already have thought about different ways to handle. But now you're kind of having to combine, something that's a bit more complicated and unravel it and figure out what to do. And by the time you graduate from that course, I found, I felt really quite empowered to go back and do. And I remember talking actually to our HR director at SMS, and I said to her, she asked me when I got back, what's your feedback on the course? And I said, first and foremost, don't ever send anybody on that course unless you come back and you've got a big, hairy challenge for them to take on. Because if people do that course, you can't go back to your day job.
No.
You just can't do it. And and that's actually one of the things that sort of, I remember when I set up Escient, I thought a startup was just one of the options I had. The other one, I was quite overconfident, maybe, I don't know. But the other one I really liked the appeal of was a turnaround. So actually finding a company that was in trouble, and the bigger and the worse trouble, the better. I thought, I'm up for this.
Yeah.
I can't wait to sink my teeth into something like that and really kind of turn it around and getting it performing. And anyway, after a lot of soul searching, I decided on the startup because there were a lot of things about, the way our industry operated that I didn't like. And I thought this is a once in a lifetime chance to really start with a clean slate and kind of redefine what best practice looks like in our industry.
What a great jumping off point for Escient, though. The mindset that you were in, the confidence that you were in, financial position you were in. You were just like Tin and the team were. It was a wonderful show of faith in you and the idea for them to come alongside, but equally for them, how fortunate for you to have been in that place and in that spot to take that into the launch of Escient. So
yeah, but I was so honoured when they all agreed to do it because, to be honest, Paul, I didn't know what they were going to say.
So tell us about the conversation. Did you have it one-on-one with them, or did you put them in a room? Tell us the story of the conversations.
Yeah, no, I'll wind back a little bit because I left SMS not really sure of what I was going to do, and I also had the golden handcuffs. And, for 6 months, I ended up taking 9 months off because Martha and I did a bit of travel and did a big camping trip around Australia and all that. And during this time, I was thinking about what I wanted to do and starting to have conversations with people. I'd spoken to Tom, and Tom thought it was a great idea because he had retired then as well. And so I thought, let's have a meeting. I'll just grab anyone who I think might be interested in this to help get the company started. We'll have a meeting. So we had a meeting in Melbourne at the airport in the Park Royal or whatever it is at the airport. I've still got a photo of the room, Newco meeting. So we had a meeting in there and just talked around the idea. It was an interesting group of people at the meeting. You'd know a lot of them, but some of them decided actually it wasn't for them. They were going to stay doing what they were doing, which I totally respected because they were in good jobs.
Yeah.
Why would you take a chance, if it's not for you? And but others were in, and I was really honoured. I had the discussion with Tin, and I told him what I was thinking, and would love for him to be a part of it. We didn't really know what job. It wasn't like Paul, I'm offering you the job of state manager in South Australia or something. We didn't have any employees. We were just sort of taking the first baby steps, really. But Tin said, I'm in, and so did Rebecca in Melbourne. She was in a good job. She was working with Click, and again, like the kind of guilt that you feel when you're taking other people's money to help capitalize the company. I felt I kind of sucking these people out of good jobs, and I thought, gee, failure is not an option, and so Beck joined as well, and then we had to sort of get some consultants to join us also. And I remember having discussions with some of the best people that I remember working with, Catherine Edis and Kelly Fury and Alyssa Proctor, and Alyssa was the first to come back. And I remember she knows, she'll smile when she hears this on the podcast, but she was I remember having a coffee meeting with her and talking to her about the opportunity, and she said, yeah, I'm in. She sent me a text, and she wanted to finish off the project that she was working on, but she was one of the founding shareholders as well. And Catherine Edis and Kelly Fury, and interesting, the first three consultants were all women, and which I thought, and not that they were the only ones we asked by any means, but it was just coincidence really that they were. But I remember feeling like we'd created this environment actually where because in our industry, as you know, women are underrepresented, but we're sort of creating this environment where women are feeling empowered and supported. And I thought that was a great hallmark of the company as well, that, it was a meritocracy, and, it was very equitable for anyone who wanted to join. They didn't have to join as a shareholder. They could just join as an employee if they wanted to, and a lot of people did. So yeah, it was a really kind of awkward but exciting time, having these conversations with people trying to talk up a company that didn't really exist. It was more of an idea than it was a company.
Yeah.
And, the July, I remember 2016, I spent setting up bank accounts and registering the company and organising insurances and all that. And then by August, September, we started to hire people. And so we had enough money to pay them. And we had to set up tax and tax file numbers and ABNs and all this sort of stuff. Then I remember the first milestone when we were using Xero to do all of our financial accounting. And, when we were able to, we organised payroll and we were able to pay people. We could actually do pay runs, and we were like, yes, achievement number one, we can pay our people. And there's a lot of little victories along the way, but eventually we became a real company, and away we went. Yeah.
Well, that's Chris Foster McBride. And Ricky, if you're listening to this part of the podcast, we're at that very early stage with digital human assistants, and we are getting close now to be able to pay the boys. We're going to be able to do that soon as money comes in.
They'll probably appreciate that.
Yeah, and as you know, the first part of it where you're where it's all money going in, and you're going, is this even? We're very excited about this idea, but is this even an idea that's a good idea? And it's only when customers start buying and paying you, and I think sometimes also guiding you. That I'm interested from an Escient point of view, how your value proposition shifted, or whether it stayed the same. I know with our digital human assistance business, Chris and Ricky are off the charts smart, and they know about AI and intelligent automation and all these incredibly deep knowledge, which we mistakenly thought we would share early on with customers or with potential customers. And it took us a few months to stop freaking people out with what the guys could build. And they're like totally not ready for, a digital human and conversational programming with a digital human. People are like, could you help build better reports? And it's like, yeah, but did you see this?
Yeah.
It's like, yes, but that's not what people want.
Yeah.
Even though it's brilliant and it's clever and it's fascinating, people want faster reports, or people want lower risk. And we're like, it took a few months to sort of go, okay, well, if that's what you want, we can do that. We can do that brilliantly. And I was like, cool, let's do that brilliantly.
Yeah.
And people have started paying for that rather than the big dream of technology. Did you have a vision for Escient that you had to modify quickly, or did your original vision come true?
A bit of both. I think there are some things that haven't changed, but I think we came up with a client value proposition and an employee value proposition that we felt would hit the mark. And so, there's a couple of books that have really shaped the way I think about these things, startups. And one of them is called The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, where he advocates, instead of doing a big 5-year strategy, he's an investor in Silicon Valley, and he said the companies that do that are dead. Basically, really what you need to do is a lot of micro experimentation with your clients, and then make sure you advance your product or service or whatever it is in the feature of maximum benefit for clients always.
Yeah.
By keeping close to your clients and getting their feedback. And so that was one of them. And the other one was Blue Ocean Strategy, which is how do you differentiate in a crowded market. But on the lean startup thing, we felt actually trust and transparency was one of the kind of hallmarks that we wanted to be known for. And then, the challenge is you can say these things, but how do you bring them to life? And so we decided to set up a client advisory board, which actually I think you might have been on.
Yes.
Right back at the start, where we thought, actually, let's get in our most important clients and just talk to them openly about our strategy and about anything they want to know about our business, and just listen to them in terms of their advice and feedback. And clients loved it because, it gave them a bit of clout in terms of us as a partner, and they got to spend time with each other as well. So it was a bit of a networking thing also. But also we felt we didn't want to be the kind of startup that, a lot of them will shoot at anything that moves and then sort of overstate their capability and never say no to work and then struggle with delivery. And we thought, no, we don't want to be that. So let's just talk openly about anything, our capability, who we're hiring, our finances, and just kind of listen to them. And if they've got concerns or if they've got suggestions, let's just get that feedback. And so that actually worked quite well. The client advisory board, we called it.
Yeah, it's a brilliant idea.
We came up with a little charter for the board. And so there was no obligations and no accountability or whatever. It was really just about, friendly advice. And so that worked quite well. There were others as well. We wanted to be creative and innovative. That really hasn't changed. And our employee value proposition was really about, the opportunity to own part of the company and so on, which interestingly, actually, we still do that. If people want to buy shares, they can. But we found through our surveys that actually that's kind of less of a thing now with our employees than it was when we first started in the first few years. People will still do it, but it's, they won't join the company because they can buy shares in the company. There's other things now that are probably more important, like, ongoing learning and development and working with a great team and a great coach, mentor, boss. Those sorts of things are critical for people now.
I have been a client of Escient, but also have remained close with Escient through you and certainly with Tin. And the culture, you mentioned culture, and lots of organisations mention culture, and consultants talk about culture. But you guys, for listeners, if you want to see what culture, really great culture, looks and sounds like, go and visit Escient. It is a beautiful culture. It's one where you go into the office and people look up from their desks and smile at you when you visit. It's a place where there is a tone of voice in and around the office that's got this sound of kindness in it, which is you work in advisory, business advisory and tech, not famous for, emotional intelligence sometimes to each other. But you go into Escient and there is that sense of kindness, there is that sense of respect, and there is a sense of that culture is important here, as opposed to culture is not something that sits benignly in our organisation. There is a genuine sense in Escient when you walk in there that, here's our culture, handle it with care.
Yeah, no, you're right, and kudos to our team. When I was the only employee, I was really key in establishing that to begin with. But I think it's taken on a life of its own now, and a lot of our people we get in through referrals from our team, and so people have a good sense for whether someone's going to be a good fit. But also hands up for our people and culture team. They do a great job. The first interview was always a cultural fit interview, and it starts with the covering letter. A lot of people will spray and pray, as you know, in our industry when it comes to job applications, and they just get ignored. What we ask people to do is to describe in the covering letter how our values resonate with them and give us some examples. And people, the best applications are where people are able to articulate that and say why they mean something. So our values of courage, creativity, and selflessness, why they mean something to them, and then they share sometimes some very personal stories about how they've kind of lived those values and why they're important to them, and that gives us a good values fit. And then through the initial interview and subsequent interviews, we get a good feel for some of their other cultural attributes and soft skills. This is important too. So when we set up the company, another point of difference we wanted to have was, rather than hiring the same people that are kind of circulate around in our industry and saying, you've got to have 5 years of consulting experience, for example, to join our company, we thought, why do we want that? I mean, there are a lot of good people out there who aren't consultants but would make great consultants. So let's actually define what defines a good consultant. And we came up with a range of about 15 soft skills. So things like, being a quick study, being a good communicator, being able to work with incomplete information, being a structured problem solver, teamwork, all these kinds of things. We came up with this whole list and we thought, yeah, if people have got these skills, it doesn't matter, what their background is, they're going to make a great consultant.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what we look for. And as a result, we've got this really diverse team of people. And a lot of them, this is the first time they've ever worked in consulting, but they've always wanted to try it. But they've kind of had that opportunity with us. But a lot of them have amazingly different backgrounds, pharmacists and other allied health professionals and engineers, scientists, organizational psychologists, you name it. There's like about 30 different professions that we have in the company, which makes for a really interesting and diverse team. You talk to people. This is, I think, one of the reasons why people are so fascinated by each other. And, there's all these conversations and friendships that are emerging is, the things that people have in common are the important things.
Yeah.
But other than that, everyone's quite different. Yeah. And it makes for a fascinating. I love talking to, and I get to meet all the new starters, and I always say it's the best part of my job is talking to people and just having a chat like we are with each of our new starters, and just talking about their background or where they went on their last holiday or what their hobbies are or something like that.
That was always one of my favourite things to do at SYC was go and I would disappear sometimes for a day or two and go and sit at a site and talk and sit at a desk and people are like, oh, the boss is here. We'll give you an office. And I don't want an office. I just want a desk. Yeah. And they'd run around. I go, just do your thing and let me just disappear into the thing and I would find out their kids' names and their dogs' names and whatever. And I must admit I did feel a bit guilty from time to time. I go, this is very indulgent because I'm really enjoying listening to the conversations and I'm really enjoying hearing stories about how your grandchild has just come into the world and it was just fabulous. Experience. And then, of course, I'd go, but by this stage, the emails were really piling up. It's like, I really have to go back and answer some questions. Yeah. But it brought me such fabulous connection with what we do and why we do it as well. Yeah. But not because of the work, but because you could see the way people were going about it. Yeah. Going, wow, I work with you.
Yeah. I mean, you're a lover of people. Yeah. Like I am. And, I would find it very difficult to do my job if I didn't have that connection with people generally. Yeah. Not just our staff, but clients and so on as well. If you can't kind of sit down and have an interesting conversation with people. And I find I'm a strong believer that, if you talk to anyone for 10 minutes, you're going to find out some really interesting things about them that you won't want to finish the conversation. Yeah. Everyone has a backstory. And, I think the art of conversation is actually how do you extract that and make it a really interesting discussion.
Yeah. And it's interesting you use the word love. We've talked about this before, but love as a corporate word, lover of people and love what I do, love my work and I love the people I work with, and not as a throwaway line. And bit like, and I would say that and see some people would squirm with that. I said, no, it's not. It's not a word to squirm around. If you love the people that you work with, it means you have some pretty good, if it's functional, you have great conversations with them, both good ones and tough ones. But they're always real and they always come from a good place. Like, Steve, I really care about you, so I'm going to give you some feedback that may hurt your feelings. It's not intended to, but I need to give you some feedback. And in doing so, very rarely hurt.
No, that's right.
Their feelings, but it meant that we could all, what I called, lean out over the edge and not have to worry that someone was going to push us over it. But if we got into trouble, they would pull us in. And very rarely did people let us down in that regard. There are some people where you go, oh, you don't fit. Yeah. And you don't fit. And we know you don't fit. So that didn't really last very long and we didn't feel sorry. I think some organisations sort of go, yeah, but we tolerate Steve's really bad behaviour because he can sell a lot. It's like, yeah, we can't put up with his bad behaviour though, because we don't know how many other people could sell a lot if he's not there like a creosote tree sucking all of the life out of the soil.
Creosote tree. Yeah, no, that's right.
So for people listening who may not have come across Escient, how many people do you have now, and how is Escient everywhere?
So we about 170 people, and we started in Adelaide. That was our first office, and then sort of pretty quickly set up Melbourne and Sydney after that, and then about a year or so later set up Brisbane. So we have 4 offices at the moment: Adelaide, Melbourne,
Amazing.
Sydney, Brisbane.
In what time frame?
So the first 3 were really within the first year, and then actually, first 9 months really, and then Brisbane came along the following year. Because we wanted to wait until we found the right person to sort of lead the business there. But yeah, no, it's grown really well.
So lots of people have a picture in their mind in lots of podcasts and social media around fast-growing entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs of fast growth companies in Australia look and sound like this picture. And you don't sound like an entrepreneur of a fast growth, high growth company in terms of that paradigm, but you are, and what you're building is not just fast but sustainable because of the way you're doing, isn't it?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think that people who, and there are a lot of really good people. Everyone has their own personal style of how they express themselves, and some people who are really passionate about their business talk with a lot of energy, and you can sense that, and they're quite driven, and they're very strong in their vision, and that sort of thing. I kind of feel like I have a lot of those things. Maybe I don't talk with a lot of energy, but I do. I am very passionate about the business, and we do have a lot of discussions and strategizing workshops and all that sort of thing about where we'd like to take the business going forward, and some really interesting things that I think are going to happen for us in the next few years. So, what
are they? Are you happy to share what some of those interesting things are?
Yeah, look, we are kind of feeling that we'd like to accelerate our growth. So we've been growing probably at about 20% per annum. We'd like to accelerate that probably to more like 50% per annum. And the way we're going to do that is through acquisitions.
Fantastic.
And there are some capabilities. We have, like most consulting organizations, a diverse set of capabilities. There's about 36 offerings that we take to market under 7 broad headings. But there are some emerging areas that are probably growing more quickly than we can in terms of our delivery capability. Yeah. So things like, cyber, AI, data analytics, sustainability, design, these are all sort of areas that, we can choose to either grow internally, and we could probably do that with 1 or 2 of them, but not all of them. Or we could partner with organizations, which we have done in a lot of those areas, go to market with a partner, or we could acquire an organization, that might be able to bring us that capability, and that we could then leverage and grow and integrate in with our other offerings that we take to market. And so in order for us to be able to do that, out of our retained earnings at the moment, we could probably do a couple of small acquisitions, but we've kind of, if we want to do this in a kind of sustainable way, we're probably going to need, we're at the same stage that we were at the beginning, where I said, I don't just want to grow out of retained earnings and, sort of incremental thinking, which is how I set up Permian. I kind of feel like, let's go for it. And that's the mindset that we're in. And so we've got a project internally at the moment looking at our capital structure. Do we borrow? Do we bring in a PE partner? What do we do? Yeah. So there's a few options that we're looking at there. Another couple of the projects that we're working on at the moment is there's one which is to do with our business systems and making sure that they're enterprise grade, so that instead of the startup systems that a lot of companies start with, we're ready to do multi-company and multiple currency accounting and really kind of beef it up. And the third one is actually around our organisational transformation, which Tin is leading at the moment. And he has a team, and they're doing a great job. But that's about transforming the structure of our organisation so that it's much more geared to support our growth, where we can have a dedicated area looking at strategy and acquisitions, as well as streamline our consulting business, as well as diversify our business for resilience as well. So there's some pretty exciting things happening with those three projects at the moment.
Man, all three of those are like, you see me leaning in my chair. I'm like, oh my God, look how fun that is. That's such good stuff. And as you were talking as well, I was remembering the times as SYC grew and we would outgrow our finance system. And which is easy to say, but you go through from MyOb to ACPAC to Tech One and you guys helped us do that.
Yeah, that's right. Tech One.
But they were always the next system was always too big, and the system you were outgrowing was holding you back.
Yeah.
And it always reminded me of being a kid where you're like, your mum would say, you'll grow into it.
Yeah.
I was like, it's too big and I feel silly. I was like, I know, but you'll grow into it.
Yeah.
But some of those systems and some of that process stuff challenges your identity as well. It's like, well, we're letting go of this legacy process and this system, but the next big one, we're kind of staying with that. And sometimes it feels a bit too ambitious to say with that yet, doesn't it?
Well, the transitions, can be challenging, and I guess we see ourselves transitioning really from being a startup to a scale up and transitioning into a small enterprise. Basically, we're 170 now. In a few years, we expect we'll be 500.
Yeah,
and then we'll be 1,000, and our aim is not to. Well, I don't feel like focusing on vanity metrics, but that's just a projection of probably where we're going to go. But I think for us, because you become what you measure, and for us, the things we like to measure are around client impact. That for us is a big one. That's what we want to be is a true partner for our clients and impact the toughest things that they're able to achieve in a meaningful way. For benefit of their people and their clients, and having a kind of the best employee experience for our team as well. So employee value proposition is one. Obviously being financially kind of successful so that we can reinvest back in and so on and provide a fair return to all of those shareholders that tipped in to begin with. And the fourth one is in relation to society and the community. We are striving for society impact. We're very big. We have quite a well-developed ESG program with B Corp certification and a reconciliation action plan and a partnership with the Black Dog Institute. We give them $200K of pro bono consulting each year and a $10K donation and do fundraising for them as well. So we have all these things that are kind of important to us and our people in terms of, this kind of social contribution as well. Yeah, because the way I see it is, you can measure the value of any organisation by the amount that it improves people's lives. I mean, that's a fact. And that's not just being altruistic. That is a real measure, and that is how companies are measured. And I think when you understand that, you kind of realise that actually it's all about people, and companies are kind of an artificial construct in a way. It's a way to aggregate people with a common purpose, but at the end of the day, it's all about how do we help people in other organisations and in the community more generally. That's what we're all here to do, really.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah.
I was, as you were talking then, I thought, gosh, imagine if Qantas had Steve Mabbs running it. I doubt you would have come out and high-fived the chairman saying we made a $1.4 billion gazillion dollar surplus, and then wondered why everybody was mad.
Yeah, even though we've mucked around all of our
we
customers.
Illegally let staff go. We sold tickets that didn't exist and we got JobKeeper. But $1.4 billion, why is everyone mad?
Yeah, I think in cases like that, I think it comes down to, consistency and authenticity. Because I think, if a company goes out to market and says, you know what, all we care about is profit, and they behave in that way. They signal that with everything they do. People will
they
go,
do.
well, they're authentic. You know, I may not like it, but that's who they are, and they're living in accordance with their purpose and their values and their mission.
Yeah.
But I think the issues arise when, you know, companies say one thing but then behave in a different way. And that's what erodes trust, I think, is when there's inauthentic actions and communications and people are trying to get a read for, you know, hang on, you're saying one thing, but, you know, I'm kind of getting different signals here. And so I think it's important to kind of, you know, with any organization to kind of really delve into what kind of organization you are, what is really important, and then make sure that every time you have an opportunity to message that through your actions or how you communicate and the decisions you make, importantly, that you kind of live that. And I think, you know, COVID was a time where a lot of organizations really kind of discovered actually who they are. Yeah. Not because they'd necessarily asked themselves before, but, you know, they kind of, every organization had to make some pretty important decisions about, you know, what they stand for and, you know, about their relationship with their staff and with their clients and how they worked and all this sort of thing. And I think it was quite telling, actually, the different responses that organizations had. It was quite a stressing time for us too. Yeah. But I'm really proud of the way that our team handled that challenge and came out the other side.
What do you think of the conversation around the place about dragging everyone back into offices now and, you know, people lamenting that this COVID's over, no more flexible working arrangements, everybody back in the office. What's your take on that?
I think we're yet to find the sweet spot. And I think the sweet spot is different for different organizations and different industries. I used to go to the office most days and now I work at home most days actually myself, but I feel still strongly connected to everyone in the company because obviously the technology's advanced and we can Teams immediately and I'm having conversations all the time with people around the nation. So I feel strongly connected with them. But sometimes, you know, and we all fly our national team together sometimes if we've got a workshop or something like that, because nothing beats being in the room. And I think the same is true of you know, the relationships that you develop with your co-workers in a particular location. It's a deeper, more fulfilling relationship, I think, if you've got to meet them in person and work alongside them and, you know, the little sort of next door chats you have about different things and, oh, what are you working on and that sort of thing. Normally when you have these communications online, they're with a purpose. But sometimes conversations start without a purpose, but they can lead to something. And I think, you know, with any organization, I think there's a balance. I can see why a lot of employers, including us, are encouraging people to come back into the office and collaborate because you really get to know each other and then you get dividends from those relationships later when people are separated. They can work together on stuff and they kind of know each other. But I think it's hard to necessarily, you know, develop that kind of depth of relationship if you've never actually met someone face to face.
I agree. Yeah. Steve, what a fabulous conversation. We always have fabulous conversations.
Yeah, it was great to catch up, mate.
Enjoy them. At the end of every one of these podcasts, I ask the same question, and I'm going to ask the same one of you. When you're driving home, no matter what sort of day you've had, a song comes on the radio that makes you smile. No matter what mood you're in, it'll make you smile. What's the song?
Wow, that's there's a few good ones. You know, it's probably they don't play my songs on the radio anymore. They may not play yours either. It's usually Spotify, yeah. So on the playlist, but yeah, I mean, I grew up in the 70s. I was born in the 60s and I grew up in the 70s. So pretty much anything from the 70s and maybe the 80s is really good for me. But one of my favourite bands is ELO, Electric Light Orchestra.
Yeah, there you go.
And, you know, a lot of their music I love listening to. Kansas as well. I kind of rediscovered them recently. They were a band from the 70s and they've been pretty much there's only two of the original band members are still in the band, but they've really stuck true to their sort of progressive rock formula with the violins and the guitars and everything. And that's a band I love. I love all of their stuff actually. And it's just interesting to see how it's evolved over the last 50 years. Really. but they're a great band. Yeah, I mean, Cold Chisel, Ian Moss. I've managed to get a selfie with Ian Moss, one of my many selfies over the years. So he's a bit of a hero of mine. But yeah.
Tell us about your selfie collection. You're a bit of a selfie.
Yeah, I am.
Selfie taker, collector.
Martha says I'm shameless. Actually, if I see somebody famous, in the airport lounge or just walking down the street or whatever, I mean, you have to read the room.
Yeah, of course.
I've seen Robert Dippier Domenico and Andrew Simons. I saw him, the cricketer. I saw him at but they were both kind of signaling that they wanted to be left alone. So you got to respect that.
Yeah.
But a lot of other people, you just make eye contact and. And I actually sat next to Penny Wong on a plane once, so I had a good chat with her. Actually, that was really interesting chat. Annabelle Crabb, Martha and I went to her Fringe thing, and then she was just walking around afterwards. So I went up to her and said, "Oh, look." The first thing I said was, "Look, I'm not a stalker, but I don't know why I said that.
Yeah,
but,
I'm not a stalker, but
yeah, but yeah." And she said, "Oh, that's what they all say." Yeah. She said. It's all right. I've got my security here. Taser's ready.
Yeah.
She's hilarious. Anyway, so had a good chat with her and got a selfie. Yeah, but Ian Moss, James Rain, Craig Lowndes, the V8 supercar driver.
Yeah.
Just a lot of really interesting people. And I find actually that, if you just kind of treat people respectfully. James Tompkins as well, the awesome foursome guy. I saw him in the Qantas Club in Sydney, and we were just talking about cameras and photography because that's a pet interest of his. So we just had a chat about that. But yeah, if you just go up and, you're not threatening, and I probably don't come across as threatening, so people are, willing to take a chance and talk to me and just find something in common that you want to have a chat about and then pop the question. No one's ever said no. Although Penny Wong did say it's the first time she's been asked on an aeroplane.
Well, I think that's brilliant. Steve, thank you so much for being on the CEO Advantage podcast.
Pleasure, awesome. Paul. Really great talking to you. Thanks for inviting me.